Okay, let's get serious. Can cold weather really make you sick? I mean, is that just something your mom says to get you to put on a jacket? Or is there actually some real science behind it? Because I remember when I was a kid, every time I went outside in November without a hoodie, my mom would say,
"You're going to catch a cold."
I just roll my eyes. Now I'm someone who researches science, and I still roll my eyes at my mom about this. Forget the intro. I don't like intros anyway. The intro isn't even mine. So let's start with the most obvious question. Why does a cold make us... Wait a minute. This music isn't for this video. Anyway, let's continue. Why do we think the cold makes us sick? This is one of those beliefs so deeply ingrained in us that no one would ever question it. Isn't that right? It looks like a cause and effect relationship. Your brain makes that connection. But the thing is, correlation isn't causation. That's the first thing they teach you in any science class. When researchers actually started testing this, putting people in cold rooms and having them breathe in virus samples, they were disappointed. Cold air alone doesn't give you a cold. You could sit in a freezing room for hours, but if there's no virus around, you'll just feel cold, but you'll be fine. But yeah, I'm wondering right now why you want to sit out in the cold. So why do we get sick more often in the winter? That's the real question. And the answer, to be honest, involves virology, human behavior, vitamin D, and some strange physical rules about how viruses spread through the air. If you're ready, I'm gonna dive a little deeper. Let's talk about the real villains here. Viruses. Specifically rhinoviruses, which cause the common cold, and influenza viruses, which cause the flu. These are the guys wrecking your winters. Now here's something that surprised me when I first read about it. Viruses have a favorite temperature. Not like a conscious preference, obviously, but at a biological level, many respiratory viruses, including influenza, survive and spread much more effectively in cold, dry air. Think of it like this. A virus particle is basically a tiny package of genetic material wrapped in a protein coat. In warm, humid, summer air, that coat degrades faster. The virus falls apart before it can reach you. But in cold, dry winter air, that coat stays intact longer. The virus is basically wearing a little protective winter jacket of its own. Kind of unfair, honestly. But wait, it gets better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. Here's one of my favorite facts that I often share at parties. What's the big deal? Can I talk about this kind of thing at parties? Your nose has its own immune system, literally. The mucus in your nasal passages isn't just gross. Ew! It's full of tiny hair-like structures called cilia, and their job is to expel bacteria and viruses before they reach the depths of your respiratory tract. It's a physical line of defense. What about cold air? Cold air slows down the movement of these cilia, and significantly so. When you breathe in cold air, the temperature inside your nasal cavity drops, and your cilia slow down to almost a crawl. They don't sweep as quickly. They don't clean as efficiently. So viruses that would normally be expelled, swallowed, and destroyed by your stomach acid gain a little extra time to linger around. And sometimes that's all they need. Actually, I always think about this when I'm running along the beach in Santa Monica in December. If the dry Santa Ana winds are blowing, I feel that strange dryness in my nose and say, yeah, okay, the cilia are really struggling right now. Alright, but I think the most important factor is this, and strangely enough, it's the most human one. In winter, we retreat indoors, and we bring everyone along with us. Think about it. On a summer day, the windows are open. Everyone's outside. You're at the beach, in the park. There's a breeze. There's space. If someone next to you sneezes, that sneeze spreads out into the open air and drifts away. In winter, however, you're crammed into an office with recirculated air. You're on a crowded subway. You're at a New Year's party in someone's home where 40 people are sharing the same air. The ventilation is terrible, and that one person who doesn't feel sick is inhaling virus particles every breath. Being in crowded indoor spaces in the winter is, at its core, a perfect system for the spread of respiratory viruses. It's not the cold that's to blame. It's us, our behavior. It's a perfectly reasonable desire not to be outside when the weather's freezing cold. And to make this even clearer, let's make a wild comparison. Researchers studied military bases where young, healthy people live in extremely cramped quarters year-round. And even in these communities, respiratory illnesses peak in the winter. It's not because the soldiers suddenly become less healthy, it's because the cold weather changes how and where people gather. Okay, here's one that I genuinely did not expect to care about this much before I started digging into the research. Vitamin D. So your body makes vitamin D from sunlight, specifically from UVB radiation hitting your skin. And vitamin D plays a surprisingly large role in immune function. It helps regulate how your immune cells respond to pathogens. When your vitamin D levels are low, your immune system is basically operating at like 70% capacity. In summer, you're outside, you're getting sun, your vitamin D levels are solid. In winter, especially if you're not in LA, if you're in, say, Chicago or Boston, you might not see real sunlight for weeks. Your levels drop, and your immune system quietly gets worse at doing its job. There's actually some fascinating data suggesting that populations living closer to the equator have lower rates of seasonal flu compared to populations in high latitude regions. And vitamin D is one of the leading hypotheses for why. Now, correlation isn't causation. I said that already, I know. And the vitamin D research is still being actively studied. It's not fully settled, but it's compelling enough that a lot of immunologists take it very seriously. And while we're talking about immune suppression, I want to bring up one more thing: stress. Because winter doesn't just bring cold air, it brings holiday stress. It brings end-of-year deadlines. It brings less sleep, more travel, disrupted routines. Last December, I was finishing up a research paper. I was basically living on coffee and 3 hours of sleep a night for like 2 weeks, and I got hit with the worst cold I'd had in years. My immune system was just done. It had nothing left to fight with, and that tracks with the science. Chronic stress elevates cortisol, which suppresses immune function. Sleep deprivation reduces the production of cytokines. These are proteins your immune cells use to fight infection. When you're stressed and sleep deprived in the dead of winter, surrounded by indoor air full of circulating viruses, while your cilia are sluggish and your vitamin D is low, yeah, you're gonna get sick. And honestly, cold air is probably the least of your problems. It's not just one thing. It's 5 things happening at the same time. Cold weather is less of a cause and more of an accomplice. It sets the stage. The virus then emerges and takes advantage of it. And that's what really humbles me about this. We're modern, sophisticated people. We live in climate-controlled apartments. We have vaccines, antiviral medications, and hand sanitizers at every turn. Yet every winter, without fail, millions of people are sidelined by a virus that has plagued humanity since the dawn of history, because the virus doesn't care about our civilization. It only cares about cold, dry air and a room full of people breathing on one another. So, with all that in mind, what can you actually do? First, ventilate your spaces. Open a window whenever possible. If you're in an office or a room with many people, air circulation is extremely important. This single change can significantly reduce the amount of virus circulating around you. Second, get your vitamin D levels checked, especially if you live in a place where winters are dark. You can find out with a simple blood test. If your levels are low, taking a supplement is easy and inexpensive. Third, I can't believe I'm saying this because it seems so obvious, but wash your hands. Don't just give them a quick rinse, really wash them. 20 seconds, soap, do the whole thing. Most respiratory viruses don't just float in the air. They also land on surfaces and spread when you touch your face. Apparently, people do this about 20 times an hour. And fourth, sleep. I know, it's not exactly exciting advice, but whenever I think back to every time I've gotten sick over the past few years, lack of sleep was almost always a factor. Your immune system does most of its heavy lifting while you're asleep. If you're not sleeping, your immune system is fighting with its hands tied. So yeah, cold doesn't make you sick. And I think there's something kind of interesting about that. We've been blaming the temperature for thousands of years, when really it's the combination of biology, behavior, sunlight, and stress that creates this perfect storm every single year like clockwork. Science is like that a lot, honestly. The thing we blame and the thing that's actually happening are often two very different things. And figuring out the difference, that's kind of the whole game. If you found this interesting, there's a lot more where this came from. Subscribe to Big Consortium and leave a like. We make videos exactly like this one, where we take questions you've wondered about your whole life and actually dig into what the science says. Sometimes the answer is satisfying. Sometimes it's deeply weird. Always worth knowing.